All right, down here at Parris Island, South Carolina, you can see that we've got the black flag flying. That means that the temperature is like about 90-something degrees, but it feels like probably 120 with the humidity. And 40 years ago this month, I was down here getting thrashed as a recruit. And I'd like to say I'm down here on a vacation or a nostalgia tour, but the reality is, unfortunately, I'm down here because I'm supporting Staff Sergeant Smiley, a drill instructor who's undergoing a general court-martial right now down here at Parris Island. And UAP.org is behind this Marine, making sure that justice is served. We're funding his legal defense. And it's a sad situation because a recruit under his command died. And nobody's happy about that. That's horrible. And died during the Crucible, which is the hardest, most grueling, challenging test or trial that these recruits will go through. And upon completion, they get designated a United States Marine. And it's made to be extremely tough for a reason, because once they leave Parris Island, technically they could go off and see combat. So this is a grueling, challenging environment down here in Parris Island. And drill instructors are trained to be very, very tough and to be hard on the recruits because they have a mission to make Marines. But here's a situation where you had a senior drill instructor, this Staff Sergeant Smiley, outstanding individual. This guy, he was even selected to be on the All-Marine Wrestling team. That's how much discipline this warrior has. Where he's being held accountable for this death, where this recruit died. And it's kind of an interesting thing because it almost is like the perfect storm in that you had a situation where this recruit, after he died, they did an autopsy, and they said, well, he died of hyperthermia or heat exhaustion, heat stroke. And the family said, hold on a second, we don't trust that. We want a more detailed, independent autopsy, and they did that. And the Dr. Feigin came back and said, no, this kid had a pre-existing heart condition. So whether or not he was going to go down during training or perhaps in combat or whatever, like it was not something that was preventable. At a certain point, something was going to happen with this kid. And the question is raised then, again, is this a perfect storm where you had the Marine Corps allowed this kid to come in? Either did a recruiter know he had a pre-existing condition, or did they do the proper test to figure out whether or not he had a pre-existing condition? So the question is, here's a recruit who may or may not or should not have been down here at basic training. Then you had this Staff Sergeant Smiley, who supposedly was a great drill instructor, but during the investigation they said, well, he hadn't gone through all the proper training to be a senior drill instructor. That's interesting. And they also said, you know what, the Crucible, the way it was set up in a black flag environment with this heat, perhaps it wasn't set up in such a way that accurately was looking out for the recruits properly. So you had a recruit that shouldn't be here, a drill instructor that may not have been trained, and you had a system that perhaps was flawed. Yet instead of the acting commandant coming out right now and saying, hold on a second, I'm going to take this one. This looks like the Marine Corps has some real culpability here. And so as the leader of the Marine Corps, Eric Smith could come out and say, let's address this. Let's dig into this a little deeper. Instead, the Marine Corps just said, no, we're going to go forward. We're going to hold this staff sergeant accountable. And it's interesting because right now they're in voir dire. And while they're going through voir dire and they're interviewing all these potential panelists or jury members, which, keep in mind, in the Uniform Code of Military Justice, they only need 3/4 of the panel or the jury to find guilt. They don't need a unanimous conviction. But they're asking these people, well, have you ever seen drill instructors go to court-martial before? And like, oh yes, when drill instructors do something wrong, they go to court-martial. Like, wait a second, you mean when they're accused of doing, oh, right, we meant when they're accused. But have you ever seen a drill instructor go to court-martial and be found not guilty? Well, they haven't. And so here's the problem. So you're selecting a jury from people who are down here at the command, Parris Island, South Carolina, boot camp, United States Marine Corps, who say, well, this is the way it works. You find a guy guilty, then you send him to court-martial, so of course he's guilty. And we're going to ask that jury to find this guy not guilty? I don't know that this guy can even get a fair trial, but This is what's happening right now in the voir dire. It's happening in real time right down here in Parris Island, South Carolina. And we'll keep you updated, and UAP.org will continue to support. Thank you for all your donations, all your support, and spreading the word, because we have to make sure that our warriors, the ones who are protecting our rights, get their rights preserved as well. So God bless and Semper Fi.